morning, folks. I have a copy of the Lake Sturgeon Working Group report that we just finished up the pulling together essentially a round of briefs with everything that's taking place in the Huron Erie corridor as well as the entire Lake Erie Basin as well as the Niagara system. And I'm going to focus on this Maumee project, but the rest of the information on the briefs is located on a website that I'll have, and I'll bring that up at the very end. So this is our second year as a working group that we've been asked to participate in this meeting. I appreciate that we're continuing to add hopefully value to this meeting by presenting some of the information that we've been involved with. So it's the motion here with the clickers and how we advance, right? There we go. So there's a litany of partners that have been involved with this project. It seems like it's continuing to grow. I think as a few people are kind of moving to other agencies, and they've been involved from the outset. We've lost a couple of people. Mike Thomas is now retired, and Lloyd Moore is also retired. My hope is that we don't lose too many more people before things move a little bit further ahead. But I was talking to some of the young folks yesterday from Chris Vanderbeek's shop and talking about this network of people that when we work in the Great Lakes region, it's really a pretty envious place to work in terms of our ability to, come up with an idea, and in a couple of years, you got essentially a who's who of people that are from representing many agencies, and we get a lot of work done because we have meetings like this, for instance, and I know John Detmers and I have talked ad nauseum many times, probably when you and I both get a few beers on us about this ability to do this work, and it's a really amazing group to be part of because you see all the collaboration on all the talks and the number of folks that are involved with this. So this is no exception, this work that we're embarking on here. To give you a little bit of background, historically, the Lake Erie Basin, there were 19 spawning populations around the basin. Tim Haxton and others put some work based on the commercial catch data, and the estimates were that Lake Erie supported between 300,000 and over 1 million adults in the system. Fast forward to today, and we've essentially got a bookend on either side of the Lake Erie Basin. We don't have any of the tributaries that are producing a viable population of fish anymore, and not like in many other species, essentially, but Lake Sturgeon are where I got my start coming here in the Great Lakes, and it continues to be a really interesting fish to captivate and get a lot of people's interest generated. So the work that's taking place with the GLaDOS array, Mike Thomas, for me, kind of put it in perspective. He said, I've been tagging sturgeon. He's got thousands of fish tagged, a 30-plus year career working in the Huron Erie corridor. And he said, GLaDOS comes along, we tag 300 sturgeon, and we have, probably a factor of 10 of knowledge and understanding about movements and behavior with these fish now because of that. And I know that's consistent, and I hear that across the basin with all the other species of fish. So I don't want to discount how important the GLaDOS array is from a management perspective, and I think it is worthwhile to, as we face these economic uncertainties and where some of these monies are going to go. But it's a great program, and I am certainly a big fan of the information that's coming out of it. So some of the work that Daryl had has helped us with the work that we're embarking on for Lake Erie. We've got just under 300 fish. If you look in the the bottom there on the Detroit River, we've got 76 fish that are tagged. These are 10-year tags. These are adults, a mix of males and females. And the point of this slide here is that of those 76 fish that were tagged in the Detroit River, 17 of them migrated out into Lake Erie. And the concept or the idea here was that potentially with the Huron-Erie corridor supporting upwards of about, depending on what the new numbers ultimately are going to shake out as, but it's probably around 25 at the low end and 40,000 fish within that system, that it would serve as a source population for fish to repatriate to some of these tributaries, either up into Lake Erie, Lake Huron, like in the Saginaw system, or down to any of the tributaries in Lake Erie. So this telemetry data has given us a snapshot of how these fish migrate in and out of this corridor. And of those 76 fish tagged originally in the Detroit, 17 migrated down into Lake Erie. We had 85 in the upper St. Clair. We had one of those that migrated down into Lake Erie. And we had fish from Lake Huron that were tagged as part of the commercial fishing support that we get from the Purdy family. We had one of those fish that kind of nosed down into Lake Erie. Of course, time will be in our favor long term with these 10-year tags, but in 2011 we had 8 fish that were at large, 12 it increased to 82, 2013 we were up to 162, and 2014 and so forth, and by 2015 all the fish were at large. We're anxiously waiting on the new data that's going to be coming through when we download the receivers. But essentially, the receiver deployment dates on the Huron River, the Raisin River, Sandusky, and the Maumee was Maumee's the good one here. We've got that particular river covered from 2011 through 16, so through the entire time series. And essentially, let me back up here. Essentially, we didn't have any of the sturgeon we have tagged nosing into any of these rivers during those time frames when the potential for spawning would be on those systems. So, kind of jumping to here, the results indicate that recolonization of these historical tributaries due to straying is going to be an incredibly slow process. So that's kind of taking a lot of this information and kind of moving to, helping augment that with stocking the system in the Maumee. So, more people getting buy-in by local stakeholders, and some of the historic background on this. We knew that from, sometimes these are kind of anecdotal news reports or some of the only information we may have with this system. But the sturgeon once ran up the river by the hundreds as far as the rapids above Perrysburg. But at present, and that was 1885, they're absent. Current population status, we did some work with Eric and Chris, and Jim McPhee was working for Ohio back then, and before he worked for me for a bit, but that was back in the mid-2000s, and we put egg mats, gill nets, and set lines to try and document whether or not these fish were moving up into the Maumee River. And then a lot of work is taking place with the University of Toledo and Chris Mayer and a couple of her grad students. Brian Schmidt now works for me. And they were not detecting any sturgeon larvae or eggs within the work that they were involved with. So in the fall of 13, we set out and went down to Toledo Zoo, and we met with a number of folks, including Sandy Bin. I don't know how many of you know Sandy Bin, but she's a pretty high energy lady and a good person to have on your side if she likes you, and not a good person to have on your side if she's disagreeing with you. So, one of the quotes there, she wanted to embark on a project that would raise awareness about Lake Erie watershed and some of the current problems with the Maumee AOC. So this is kind of right in that time frame when they were shutting down the system because of the algae, and basically raise awareness of what we're doing to the environment. So one potential project, and again, having this charismatic megafauna with lake sturgeon is really, again, I think it's an incredible blessing to have an organism like that within the system. We don't get quite as much resonance when we talk about the northern mad tom, this tiny ictalurida. People just don't quite understand the value of something like that. But sturgeon, they're captivating, they're old, you can relate it to, a 70-year-old fish is as old as I think Don Einhaus. Sorry, you're the first person I saw. All right. Fast forward, sorry about that. 2014, we had a meeting at Toledo Zoo. Ohio DNR has been a great advocate of this project. Fish and Wildlife Service, and again, the number of folks that are involved. We discussed potential streamside rearing. Summer of 14, we defined the current habitat suitability, and we got Jessica Sherman hired from the University of Toledo, a PhD candidate there, and she did the habitat suitability model for this system. Ohio requested a restoration plan developed outlining the detail of the project, and the restoration plan is sort of bulleted right there with the goals of biology, historical status, current habitat conditions. That was the big one, looking at whether or not there were still constraints, stocking consideration, success, public outreach and education, and another big component that's important to fish and wildlife, and I think should be important to us all, regulation and enforcement, and then long-term management. Jessica's work, she's done a great job with this. The habitat suitability model, she looked at spawning adults in age 0, evaluating the suitability of the system that was available up to the first low-head dams that are up by Perrysburg. And looked at the spatially explicit model for each of those two life stages. So the take home here is there's 192 hectares of good spawning habitat. And she's also converted this to potential numbers of fish that could be utilizing a system like the Maumee. Point is, it's a big system and can support a lot of fish. For the age 0, 429 hectares of good habitat for the early life stages where these fish would be utilizing probably the first year, potentially 2 of their lives. So, can the Maumee River support lake sturgeon population? We've gotten to that answer, it's yes. We're developing the restoration plan, which I presented, and with some of the turnover that took place in Ohio with Jeff leaving and Chris leaving. Those were the first 2 folks taking a crack at this restoration plan once Jessica had passed that on, the draft to them. So we got till, I think, May, that we're waiting on from Travis to give his stamp of approval, and my hope is that the LEC will say, we're going to embrace this and we want this to continue to move forward. So,
not after that Einhaus crack.
So the Fish and Wildlife Restoration Act, we secured funding, $90,000 from them last year, and then Region 3 part of our Laurel template for lake sturgeon, we had $80,000 that we presented to the zoo to build the streamside trailer. That's where it's going to be housed, is at the zoo. The plan is to annually stock 3,000 fingerlings into the Maumee. We're going to do this as a test scenario, looking at the imprinting of a streamside facility at the zoo, and then the other 1,500 are going to be raised at the Genoa National Fish Hatchery. We can do it a lot cheaper at these hatcheries. We're also working with Trevor Pitcher from the University of Windsor, looking at imprinting associated with using chemical signature cues for various rivers, that he can replicate that in a hatchery environment. So some promising things that potentially are coming out of it. So it's going to be located on the Toledo Zoo property, and the zoo in 2014 was named one of the best zoos in North America. They get 1 million visitors every year, so the potential for outreach for something like this is pretty huge. This is the Hellbender facility. This is what they're constructing. Similar, only we'll have circular tanks in the system there for the sturgeon work that's going to be taking place. And it's going to be staffed by Toledo Zoo. They're bringing in-kind support for this project associated with DNR and the work that Fish and Wildlife, Michigan DNR is going to be involved helping us collect the gametes and all that sort of stuff. The stocking strategy, again, am I going the right way here? Yeah, I think so. Donor populations from the St. Clair, Southern Lake Huron. That's all the genetic stocking unit. It's all the same fish. 10 females, 50 males each year, a total of 200 females and 1,000 males over the course of this. Again, Purdy Fisheries is where the raceway is at, that we're going to be doing all of the staging of these fish and getting them to sexual maturity before we collect the eggs and fertilize them. The research objectives, we're going to be looking at stocking site fidelity rates associated with that, stream side versus conventional, and then the post-stocking survival using acoustic telemetry, and then recapture from work that we're embarking on, trying to involve the commercial fishers in the Western Basin and some of the commercial fishers in Ontario waters to help us collect these fish, and all of them are going to be tagged with pig tags. So we'll have that information as well as a handful of them that will be tagged with acoustic transmitters. So, and then the contribution to the Lake Sturgeon stock from the Maumee for the adjoining waters. So, outreach, big deal. Again, 1 million people go through that. I don't know if any of you have been involved with release ceremonies in Michigan or Wisconsin, but they're pretty huge events to get the public involved with and get them on our side and hopefully vote in our way to keep money going in things like Great Lakes Restoration Initiative. And short-term timeline, we're getting ready to do a pilot in 2017, this spring. Justin pulled this presentation together for me, as well as some of my other staff from the office, and they're actually out on the water this week, and that's going to be starting soon. So the plan is to do a pilot. We're going to take some of the gametes to the Genoa National Fish Hatchery. The trailer is being constructed this summer, so it won't be online until 2018, and then should be a big event. Hopefully next spring we'll be talking about some successes, and then in the fall of 18 there'll be an invite going out to a whole bunch of people to see it in action there in at the zoo when we release these fish back into the Maumee. So that's the website. I'll leave this up for a couple of minutes. So that's the Hellbender facility at the zoo, and hopefully we'll have something cool like that for the sturgeon work that we're doing. So that's it. I got time? I guess I'm good.